Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r// Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, more from aviation maintenance, butterfly. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. More from aviation maintenance, butterfly. Germany was an amazing duty station filled with opportunity. I could travel, see amazing sights and eat new, amazing foods. One of my favorite trips was not for leisure, however it was for work. Poland joined NATO in 1999, having escaped being a cheerful and happy and entirely not coerced member of the Warsaw Pact upon the collapse of the Soviet Union. For the first short while, little had happened, but post 9/11 the opportunities to participate in foreign military excursions skyrocketed. In 2004, they'd finally decided to join the Freedom Train and send over some troops to join ISAF, NATO's International Security Assistance Forces in Afghanistan. One unit they decided to send was a company of Mi-24 Hinds. Unfortunately, you can't normally fly helicopters that far and still retain a budget/sanity/airworthiness, so the problem came down to shipping these helicopters across an ocean to the actual theater where they would fight. The catch with shipping helicopters by boat is even more of a showstopper than flying them. Sure, flying would be miserable and would drive the helicopter to an early grave, but just dropping them on a boat would be a death sentence. Navy guys can tell you, salt water loves to eat metal, especially aluminum, and helicopters are pretty much made of the stuff. If you want to get a helicopter at the final destination, and not a decidedly worthless pile of unfun white powder, plastic and seat cushions, you need to wrap it up in heavy plastic with some drains and vents installed. Having never projected force before, or at least not for a long while, needless to say the Poles had no idea how to do any of this, and would require some assistance, which is where yours truly came in. Z-Wolf: sure, I'd love to go to Poland. Platoon Sergeant: great, get with Sergeant M, $SGM, and find out the training plan. You guys leave in 3 days. I had just arrived in Germany a few months before, and had missed out on the 60th anniversary memorial of D-Day, meaning while the majority of my unit was off in France flying around VIPs, I had been stuck in Mannheim twiddling my thumbs. Since that arrival, I'd had additional duty after additional duty dumped on me with little actual maintenance opportunity. When my platoon sergeant had come to me that morning to see if I'd be willing to take some time away from my busy schedule of inventorying chemicals and watching contractors fix my engines to head out to Poland, well, I had my bag packed as he was speaking. I found $SGM, and he directed me that tomorrow morning we would have a 0800 showtime at our sister unit's hangar across the airfield where we would learn to gift wrap helicopters. I was stoked. Not only Poland, but now I was getting out of PT, physical training, i.e. exercise, for the rest of the week. The next morning found us paired up with members of the other unit, and we spent the first half of the day learning how to wrap a Blackhawk. One might think it to be fairly simple, but the process is a little more involved than one might expect. Because the plastic with which we are wrapping the helicopter is a heat shrink type, in order to keep the helicopter's various sharp edges from ripping right through it, we had to scour the entire bird, wrapping various protuberances with foam, tape and paper cups. Once the helicopter had been softened, we were to wrap it with giant rolls of white heat shrink plastic, taping the sheets in place as we went and trying to find a balance between cutting it enough, attaching it, and not slicing ourselves open as the razors dulled quickly. After taping it in place, we were given propane tanks with torch attachments which we then used to apply heat to shrink the plastic. Again, it became a balancing act of not melting the plastic, getting it to shrink, not burning the helicopter, and not torching our eyebrows off or lighting ourselves on fire. I would later nearly fail at this. First wrapping completed, we went to lunch, and upon our return we stripped the covering off and did it once more, taking a bit less time than before. Having proven to our instructors our proficiency, we were dismissed for the rest of the day. The next day saw us in a briefing where it was explained we needed to do this on the down low for reasons. I was never told anything different, but best as I can figure they just wanted to keep it quiet for regular operational security reasons. This requirement for being incognito meant we were to do this entire operation in civilian clothes and try not to be too noticeable. Yup, a bunch of American military-aged men, with military haircuts, traveling in a big group, wearing civilian clothes. Departure day arrived, and we left out early in the morning. After a nice, long drive across Germany, we crossed over into Poland and arrived at the port of Szczecin. We exited from our vans into a warehouse, in which there were 6 Mi-24 Hind attack helicopters waiting for us, devoid of blades and external stores. The advance party had already brought up all the stands we would need to get up the sides of the aircraft and all of our materials, and we set to wrapping the helicopters. Within the first 10 minutes, however, we'd had our first casualty. I'd been pushing a stand in position, but when I let go, it caught and smashed my thumb. I needed the hand to be able to wrap the foam on the helicopter, so instead I was given some light runner chores. Once the first helicopter had all the foam applied, half the crew moved on to the next to begin foaming it while the other half remained to apply the plastic wrap. Once that was complete, I was handed one of the torches and sent to work while they moved on to start the second helicopter. By the end of the day, we'd completed 3 birds, when our expected quota was only 2. We called it an early night, and came back the next morning. While at breakfast on day 2 of the trip, I spoke to the major in command of our little party. He told me about how he'd been flying in Germany for years, back when the army still used UH-1 Hueys. In particular, he explained, his favorite bird he absolutely loved to fly was the one on static display on our base. Cue memory, blurry night about 2 months prior, far too much drink and not nearly enough sense. A slightly entirely inebriated Z-Wolf being led by a friend back to his barracks room stops in front of a UH-1 on display. Z-Wolf, hey mannen. You ski this? Ish a Huey. The engine is fun, I love it, it's amazing. Z-Wolf approaches helicopter door, hugs it, starts whispering things to it. I looked across my plate at the major and made it a priority to be elsewhere ASAP. Soon after our arrival at the warehouse, the Polish ground crew and air crew arrived to learn exactly what we were doing for their helicopters. We started explaining what we were doing to the crew, while one of the pilots offered us coffee. The major was the first to take them up on the offer, and after drinking a sip returned it with a kind word. Major HEY. No one is allowed to have their coffee. Yes, I mean you too, $SGM. Put that cup down. Turns out it was pretty high-octane coffee. Which was a crying shame. My hand had healed up some in the overnight, but I was still on torch duty. At one point, a pocket of propane had gotten caught in one of the folds of plastic and backflared on me, scorching my eyebrows, hair, and even slightly melting the fleece I was wearing. I wasn't hurt, but it was a great time, and talking to the Polish crew was proving to be loads of fun, especially as they enjoyed more of their coffee. At one point, the crewman I'd been working with brought me over to his own helicopter which we were working on starting to wrap. He explained to me that her name was Model Butterfly. His beautiful butterfly. It made perfect sense to me, naming an attack helicopter that way. Once we'd finished wrapping his bird, he took a can of spray paint and sprayed a grinning shark mouth with bright eyes and butterfly wings on the fuselage. Getting into the game of things, we also started spraying fun little messages on the helicopters too, my own being a big smiley face on the tail boom. Before we had finished wrapping up the last, however, having learned I was an engine guy, my Polish compatriot ushered me to the top of his helicopter. Opening the engine cowl, he showed me one of the massive power plants which powered this behemoth of a helicopter. Polish crewman you like? Z-Wolf, this thing is huge. He laughed, and then grinned at me. Polish crewman, well, you know that Z. In Royasia, every tink is bigger. Author's final note: I wanted to actually make a joke in the title about Texas and Russia, but considering the stuff going on in the news world these days, I'd rather just avoid any inflammatory titling.